Hello everyone, I just have a few more stories left that I wrote over the past year. I hope everyone enjoyed at least some of them this past week and a half or so. If you have or hadn't, let me know in the comments section below. I'm always reading the comments. Anyway, on to the story. I'm the type of guy who comes home and throws on a Jim Jones vinyl, grabs a Corona Premier, and slams a tofu steak on a grill. Pretty normal stuff, really. Except for what happened to me last week at Linville Gorge, the deepest and most rugged gorge in the eastern United States. Now nothing feels normal anymore. Nothing will ever feel normal again. I should have listened to Marcus, my best friend since college. He'd been warning me about solo hiking for years. "One of these days," he'd say, shaking his head over our weekly beers, "you're gonna get yourself into trouble out there, and nobody's gonna be around to help you." I always laughed it off. I was experienced, careful, and I had the right gear. I'd been hiking these trails since I was a kid, back when my dad would take me out every other weekend, teaching me about the local flora and fauna, showing me how to read the weather, the terrain, the signs of approaching storms. And Dad's been gone 5 years now, cancer taking him far too early, but I still feel closest to him when I'm out on the trails. Maybe that's why I go alone so often. It's like having private conversations with his memory, sharing the silence and serenity of the wilderness, just like we used to. At least, that's what I tell myself. But the truth is, I've always preferred the solitude. There's something pure about facing nature on your own terms, without the chatter and complications of company. The day started like any other hiking trip. I'd done this trail dozens of times, but never this late in the afternoon. The autumn air had that crisp bite to it, the kind that makes you pull your jacket closer. The sun was already starting to dip behind the ridge when I made my first mistake, taking that shortcut off the marked trail. I knew better, of course. Every experienced hiker knows better. But I'd seen what looked like an interesting rock formation through the trees, and I thought I could make it there and back to the main trail before darkness fell. The forest was different here, older somehow. The trees grew closer together, their branches intertwining overhead to create a natural canopy that filtered the already fading sunlight into strange, shifting patterns on the ground. The air felt heavier, too, thick with the smell of decay and something else. Something I couldn't quite identify, but made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I remember checking my watch. 4:47 p.m. Sunset was due around 6:30, giving me plenty of time to explore and get back to the marked trail. I remember this detail specifically because it was the last normal moment of my life. The last time things made sense. Everything after that exists in a kind of nightmare logic that my mind still struggles to process. One loose rock. See, that's all it took. One damned loose rock, and suddenly I was tumbling through space, my world spinning in a kaleidoscope of red and orange leaves, gray rock faces, and darkening sky. The fall probably lasted 2 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I had enough time to think about my mom, who'd already lost her husband, would now lose her son, about Marcus, who would shake his head sadly at my funeral and say, "Told him so," about the half-finished novel on my laptop at home that would never get completed. When I landed, the snap was audible. My right ankle twisted in a way ankles aren't supposed to twist. And the pain? Jesus, the pain was something else entirely. like someone had taken a sledgehammer to my joint and then poured molten metal into the wound. I tried to move, but my body had other ideas. And that's when I saw my phone, about 15 feet away, its screen still glowing. Might as well been 15 miles. I took inventory of my situation, trying to stay calm and logical like my dad had taught me. The good news? Apart from my ankle, I seemed largely uninjured. No head trauma, no internal pain, just some scrapes and what would definitely become impressive bruises. I had my backpack with some basic supplies, a lighter, a small first aid kit, a couple of protein bars, and about a half a liter of water. The bad news? I was in a ravine I didn't recognize, off the marked trail, with a useless ankle and rapidly failing light. The temperature started dropping as night crept in. I could see my breath now, little puffs of vapor that disappeared into the darkness. My lightweight jacket wasn't meant for overnight temperatures, and the cold started seeping into my bones like poison. I checked my watch again. 5:52 p.m. The sun was already behind the ridge, and the shadows were growing longer, deeper, more absolute. And that's when I heard it. At first I thought it was just the wind through the trees or my mind playing tricks on me. But wind doesn't make that kind of sound. A wet, clicking noise like someone rapidly snapping their tongue against the roof of their mouth. And wind definitely doesn't smell like that. Like old meat left too long in a humid basement. I tried to convince myself it was just an animal. A bear maybe, or a mountain lion. But I'd encountered both before on the trails, and this was different. The way it moved was different. Animals have patterns, predictable behaviors. This thing, moved like it was testing boundaries, probing for weaknesses, like it was thinking. I could hear it moving through the undergrowth, circling. The darkness between the trees seemed to shift and writhe, deeper than natural shadows should be. My phone's screen flickered in the distance, its blue light a cruel reminder of my helplessness. And every few minutes, I'd hear branches snap, but never in the same place twice. Whatever it was toying with me. The clicking got closer, and then I saw them, eyes reflecting in the darkness. Not 2 eyes, not 4 eyes, but dozens, arranged in asymmetrical patterns that made my stomach turn. They weren't at eye level either. They started at the ground level and went up, way up, like something was standing on its hind legs, but hadn't quite figured out how legs were supposed to work. My throat closed up. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a wheeze. The thing moved closer, just staying outside my arm's reach. I could make its shape out now, or rather, shapes. It seemed to be constantly shifting, like smoke, but more solid, with limbs that bent in impossible directions. I thought about all the local legends I dismissed over the years, the stories the old-timers would tell about things that lived in the deepest parts of the Gorge. Things that predated the settlers, predated the Native Americans, maybe predated humanity itself. "There's places in them woods," old Jim at the general store used to say, "that ain't never been mapped, ain't never been walked by human feet. Well, and there's good reason for that." The worst part wasn't the eyes, or the clicking, or even the smell. It was the way it would occasionally let out these sounds, like someone trying to imitate human speech, but only having heard it through several feet of water. Almost words, but wrong, so very wrong. Each sound made my mind recoil, like it was touching something it was never meant to comprehend. I'd never been more aware of how fragile the human body is, how easily we break, how quickly we could go from apex predator to prey. And as I lay there, clutching my useless ankle, I realized something terrible. I wasn't just hurt and cold. I was being hunted, and dawn was still hours away. My hands trembled as I gathered whatever kindling I could reach from my position. Dead leaves, small twigs, hell, anything that might burn. And thank God I always carry a lighter. The small flame caught, and I fed the fire carefully, desperately, knowing it was my only defense against the cold and whatever was out there. Each time I moved to grab more fuel, pain shot through my ankle like electricity, but fear proved to be an excellent anesthetic. The firelight created a small circle of safety, but beyond its reach, the darkness seemed to pulse. The thing didn't like the fire. It kept its distance, but I could hear it circling. That wet clicking sound now accompanied by something else. A sound like bones being ground together. I thought about all those missing person posters I'd seen in the ranger station over the years. How many of them had encountered what I was encountering now? How many had heard these same sounds in their final moments? Then it started mimicking voices. At first, it was like my mother's voice, calling my name like she used to when I was a child. Then my girlfriend's laugh, but distorted, like it was being played backwards through broken speakers. The sounds made my skin crawl and my stomach heave. But the worst was when it used my father's voice, recreating conversations we had on these very trails years ago. How could it know those private moments? How could it reach into my memories like that? The fire started dying. I ran out of reachable wood, and the flames were getting smaller. And in the diminishing light, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Footprints appearing in the dirt, leading toward me. Not animal tracks, not human tracks, but something in between, with too many toes appearing one by one, as if whatever made them was slowly becoming solid enough to leave marks. Each print was slightly different from the last, as if the creature's very form was fluid, evolving with each step. My phone screen flickered again in the distance, and I made a decision. I wouldn't stay here. The fire was almost out, and that thing was getting bolder. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I started crawling toward the phone. Every inch was agony, my broken ankles screaming in protest as it dragged across the ground. The rough terrain tore at my clothes, at my skin, but I kept going. I had to. The clicking sounds grew excited, more rapid, like the creature was chattering in anticipation. I could smell it now, stronger than before, rot and wet earth and something metallic. 20 feet from my dying fire, 10 feet from my phone. The footprints were appearing faster now, closer together. Each one seemed to hold a small pool of darkness, like holes punched through the fabric of reality. 5 feet from the phone, I could see the screen clearly now. Full signal. Hope surged through me. Maybe I could call for help. Maybe someone would find me before. Then my fire went out. In the sudden darkness, I heard it move. Not slowly anymore, but with purpose. My fingers brushed my phone just as something cold and wet wrapped around my leg. It felt like touching raw meat that had somehow grown fingers. Dozens of them, all moving independently. Each finger seemed to have fingers of its own, creating an impossible fractal pattern of grasping appendages that sent waves of revulsion throughout my entire being. I managed to grab the phone and turn it over, and in its harsh blue light, I finally saw it clearly. The screen illuminated something that shouldn't exist, something that broke the laws of nature and reality alike. A face, or faces, merged and flowing like wax, eyes opening and closing in random patterns, mouths full of translucent teeth that seemed to shift and change even as I watched it. Some of the faces I recognized. My father's, my mother's, faces from the missing persons posters, faces I'd seen in my dreams. The last thing I heard before it dragged me into the darkness was my own voice, played back to me from its multiple throats, screaming in harmony. A perfect chorus of terror, a symphony of what should have been my end. I'm dictating this story now from my hospital bed at Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center, using speech-to-text software because I can't move anything below my neck anymore. The doctors say it's a miracle I survived at all. The search and rescue team found me 3 days later, hypothermic and barely alive, my spine damaged in ways that they'd never seen before. They said it looked like something had played with my vertebrae, rearranging them like puzzle pieces. The official report says I fell down a ravine and suffered severe trauma to my spinal cord. They don't mention the strange marks they found all over my back. Marks that looked like suction cups, but with teeth marks inside of them. They don't mention how my hair turned completely white overnight, or how the rescue dogs wouldn't come near me when they did eventually find me. Marcus visits every day. He doesn't say "I told you so" anymore. He just kinda sits there, holding my hand that I can't feel, watching the shadows in the corners of the room. He sees how I flinch when the sun goes down, how my heart rate monitor spikes when the darkness creeps in. He believes me now. That thing that hunted me that night, it let me live. I know that now. It wanted me to tell this story and to spread its legend, to let others know what waits in the deepest parts of Linville Gorge. Sometimes in my dreams, I still see all those faces swirling in its form, and I wonder if mine is among them now too. I've had a lot of time to think laying there in bed, about how we take our bodies for granted, about how quickly everything we are can be reduced to just a consciousness trapped in an immobile flesh. But mostly I think about the darkness, and how it's patient, and how it spreads. Well, the nurses are coming now to turn me for the night. They'll close the blinds and turn out the lights, leaving just the soft glow of medical monitors. And in that dim light sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I could see footprints appearing on the ceiling. Footprints with too many toes walking slowly toward my bed, and I wonder if I should just give in and let it take me. After all, there's nothing much more to live for. Period. End dictation.